When life feels impossible and every door seems closed, I invite you to pause for a moment, not to analyze, not to fix, not to force, but to listen. There is a quiet wisdom moving beneath the noise of your thoughts, beneath the urgency of your fears, beneath the story you have been telling yourself about what cannot be changed. That wisdom has always been there. It was there before this moment, before this challenge, before you learned to doubt yourself. It is the voice of the divine within you, and it has never been confused about your life, not for a single instant. You see, what feels impossible to the ego is never impossible to the source that created you. The ego looks at circumstances and says, this is too much. I have failed. I am trapped. I don't see a way out. But the soul does not speak that language. The soul knows that life is not happening to you. It is responding to you. And when you begin to understand that you are not separate from the intelligence that governs the universe, something profound begins to soften inside you. The tight grip of fear loosens. The need to control begins to fade. And in that opening, grace enters. There is a way out of every situation, even the ones that appear sealed shut. Not because you can outthink them, outwork them, or overpower them, but because you are aligned with a creative force that specializes in the unseen, the unexpected, the miraculous. God does not operate on human timelines or limited logic. The divine does not say this is too broken or this mistake went too far. Those are ego judgments, not spiritual truths. In the realm of spirit, there is only movement, learning, expansion, and return. Often, what you call an impossible situation is simply life asking you to let go of who you thought you had to be. It is life inviting you to release the identity built on struggle, effort, and self-doubt. The ego resists this invitation because it has invested heavily in the story of me versus the world. But the soul knows something the ego cannot comprehend. Surrender is not defeat, it is alignment. When you surrender, you are not giving up your power, you are remembering where it truly comes from. Think of a river that encounters a massive boulder in its path. The water does not panic, it does not argue with the stone, it does not decide it has failed. It simply flows around, beneath, or through, reshaping the landscape over time. The river trusts its own nature. You, too, are designed to move. You are designed to adapt, to transform, to find pathways where none appear to exist. When you stop insisting that life conform to your expectations, life begins to reveal solutions you could never have planned. The mind wants answers now. It wants certainty, guarantees, and proof. But the soul thrives on trust. Trust is not passive. It is a living, breathing choice you make moment by moment. Trust says, I may not see the whole picture, but I know I am part of something intelligent and loving. Trust says, this challenge is not here to punish me. It is here to awaken me. And when trust replaces fear, the energy of your life changes. Doors begin to open, not because you forced them, but because you finally stopped pushing against yourself. You are not here to manage life from a place of tension. You are here to participate in it from a place of awareness. Awareness that every setback carries information. Awareness that every ending clears space for a new beginning. Awareness that you are not defined by your circumstances, but by the consciousness with which you meet them. When you identify with your soul instead of your problems, the problems lose their authority over you. There is a profound freedom that comes when you realize you are not your past. You are not the decisions you regret, the words you wish you had said differently, or the opportunities you believe you missed. Those are experiences, not identities. The ego clings to them, replaying old scenes as if repetition could somehow rewrite them. But the soul lives in the present, where all power resides. In this moment, you are whole. In this moment, you are guided. In this moment, you are enough. God's way out of your impossible situation rarely looks like what you expect. It may come disguised as a delay, a redirection, a loss that clears a deeper attachment. The ego calls these obstacles. The soul recognizes them as course corrections. Life is always moving you toward greater alignment with who you truly are, even when it feels uncomfortable, especially when it feels uncomfortable. Growth is not meant to be convenient. It is meant to be liberating. When you stop asking, why is this happening to me, and begin asking, what is this teaching me about who I am not, you step into a higher level of understanding. You begin to see that many of your struggles come from trying to live a life that does not reflect your inner truth. The impossible situation becomes a mirror showing you where you have been outsourcing your worth, your peace, or your sense of safety. And once you see that, you are no longer a victim of circumstance. You are a conscious participant in your own awakening. Healing does not begin when circumstances change. Healing begins when perception changes. The moment you choose to see yourself as a divine being having a human experience rather than a fragile human trying to survive a hostile world, something inside you reorders itself. Your nervous system relaxes. Your heart opens. Your intuition becomes clearer. And from that state, inspired action arises naturally. Not forced, not frantic, inspired. You were never meant to figure everything out on your own. That belief is one of the ego's most exhausting illusions. There is a universal intelligence that coordinates the movement of galaxies, the rhythm of your breath, and the quiet nudges of your intuition. When you align with that intelligence through stillness, through presence, through trust, you become receptive to guidance that does not shout but whispers. And those whispers are often the answers you have been seeking. Forgiveness plays a crucial role in this process, not because others deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. Holding on to resentment is like gripping a hot coal and wondering why your hand hurts. The ego insists it is justified. The soul understands that justification is irrelevant to peace. When you forgive, you are not condoning what happened. You are releasing your attachment to the pain. You are saying, I choose inner freedom over being right. And in that choice, energy that was once trapped in anger or regret becomes available for creation. There are no justified resentments in the spiritual sense, because resentment keeps you anchored to the very situation you wish to escape. God's way out requires lightness, openness, and willingness. It requires you to put down the heavy armor of grievance and step forward unburdened. This does not mean forgetting the lesson. It means no longer identifying with the wound. The soul does not need scars to remember wisdom. You are already enough, even in the middle of uncertainty. You do not need to become someone else before life can support you. You do not need to fix yourself to be worthy of grace. The idea that you are incomplete is a learned belief, not a spiritual truth. The divine does not create half-finished beings. You were whole at birth, and you remain whole now, even as you evolve. The impossible situation is not a verdict on your value. It is an invitation to remember it. Living in the now is not a spiritual cliche. It is a practical doorway out of suffering. The past exists only as memory, and the future exists only as imagination. Both are mental constructs that the ego uses to distract you from the power of presence. When you anchor yourself in this moment, you meet life as it is, not as you fear it might be. And in that meeting, clarity emerges. The next step becomes obvious. Not the whole staircase, just the next step. And that is always enough. The soul always knows. It knows when to rest and when to move. It knows when to speak and when to be silent. It knows when something is complete, even if the mind protests. Learning to trust the soul is learning to trust life itself. It is recognizing that you are guided not by chance, but by a loving intelligence that sees beyond appearances. When you follow that guidance, you may not always feel comfortable, but you will feel aligned. And alignment is the true measure of success. Change your thoughts, and you change your life, not because positive thinking magically erases problems, but because your thoughts determine how you relate to reality. A mind trained in fear will interpret everything as a threat. A mind trained in trust will recognize opportunities hidden in challenge. You do not control everything that happens, but you do control the lens through which you view it. And that lens shapes your experience more than you realize. God's way out often requires patience, not as passive waiting, but as active faith. Faith that continues to act with integrity, even when results are not immediate. Faith that chooses kindness when bitterness seems easier. Faith that listens inwardly rather than reacting outwardly. This kind of faith is not blind, it is deeply intelligent. It understands that timing is part of wisdom. A seed does not become a tree overnight, but it is no less alive during the waiting. You are a divine being, not because of what you achieve, but because of what you are. You are an expression of the same creative energy that brings forth stars and seasons. That energy flows through you, not around you. When you remember this, the idea of being trapped loses its credibility. How can something infinite be confined by circumstance? How can a being of light be defined by a temporary shadow? The moment you stop resisting what is, you create space for what can be. Resistance says this should not be happening. Acceptance says this is happening, and I choose to respond with awareness. Acceptance is not resignation, it is clarity. From clarity, effective action arises. From resistance, exhaustion follows. God's way out is rarely found in struggle, it is found in surrender to truth. As you move forward, gently remind yourself that you are not alone in this journey. You are supported by seen and unseen forces, by intuition, by synchronicity, by a wisdom that has never failed you, even when you doubted it. Look back at your life and notice how many times you survived what you thought would break you. Not by accident, but by grace. That same grace is present now. Let go of the need to understand everything before you trust. Let go of the belief that peace is something you earn after everything is resolved. Peace is available now, and from peace, resolution flows more easily. When you choose peace, you align with the highest intelligence there is, and that intelligence knows exactly how to lead you out of confusion and into clarity. God has a way out of your impossible situation, not because the situation is small, but because the source within you is vast. Trust that. Breathe into that. Live from that knowing. And as you do, you will discover that the door you were searching for was never locked. It was waiting for you to remember who you are and to walk through it, not in fear, but in faith. And as you step through that remembered truth, something subtle yet unmistakable begins to happen inside you. The urgency softens. The frantic mental searching slows. You notice that the breath you were holding, sometimes for years, can finally be released. This is not because all answers have suddenly appeared, but because you have shifted from demanding certainty to allowing wisdom. The soul does not rush, it unfolds. And when you allow unfolding, life no longer feels like a battlefield, it feels like a conversation. There is a sacred intelligence in the pauses of your life. The moments when nothing seems to move, when progress feels stalled, when silence replaces momentum. The ego interprets these pauses as failure or abandonment. The soul recognizes them as recalibration. Just as the night prepares the way for dawn, these quiet spaces prepare you for a deeper level of alignment. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is random. Every delay carries a refinement that could not happen any other way. You begin to see that the struggle itself was never the point. The point was awareness. The point was to awaken you from the trance of believing that your worth depends on outcomes, approvals, or external validation. When that belief loosens, you no longer approach life with clenched fists. You approach it with open hands, and open hands can receive what closed fists never could. So much of what you call suffering comes from arguing with reality, from insisting that life should have followed a different script. But the moment you stop fighting what is, you reclaim an enormous amount of energy. That energy was never meant to fuel resistance, it was meant to fuel creation. When you stop rehearsing the story of what went wrong, you create space for a new story to emerge, one that is not written by fear, but by awareness. The divine does not rescue you from life, it reveals life through you. It shows you that you are not a small self navigating a hostile world, but a conscious extension of a loving intelligence experiencing itself in form. When this realization moves from concept to felt experience, the impossible begins to lose its grip. Problems that once felt overwhelming start to look like teachers rather than tyrants. You don't need to conquer them, you need to understand them. And understanding does not come from analysis alone, it comes from stillness, from listening, from learning to trust the quiet guidance that does not shout for attention but gently redirects you when you are willing to notice. The soul speaks in feelings of resonance, in subtle nudges, in a sense of rightness that does not require explanation. When you honor that guidance, you find yourself in the right place, at the right time, meeting the right people, having the right conversations, not because you planned it all, but because you allowed yourself to be guided. This is where true faith lives, not in blind belief, but in lived experience. Faith is choosing alignment over anxiety. Faith is acting from inner clarity rather than external pressure. Faith is continuing to show up with kindness, integrity, and openness, even when outcomes remain uncertain. This kind of faith does not demand guarantees. It trusts the process. And the process always knows more than the personality trying to manage it. You may notice that as you soften, others respond differently to you. Not because they have changed, but because you have. When you stop projecting fear, you invite cooperation. When you stop expecting rejection, you open the door to connection. The energy you bring into a situation shapes how it unfolds. This is not mysticism, it is awareness. Life mirrors consciousness with extraordinary precision. The impossible situation you are facing is not asking you to become stronger through force. It is asking you to become lighter through truth. It is asking you to release the identities that no longer serve you, the martyr, the victim, the fixer, the one who must carry everything alone. These roles may have felt necessary once, but they are heavy costumes for a soul that longs to move freely. When you lay them down, you do not lose yourself, you discover yourself. Remember, the soul does not measure success by accumulation or control. It measures success by alignment, by peace, by authenticity. When your inner world is aligned, your outer world reorganizes itself in ways that often defy logic. This is why forcing outcomes rarely works, but inspired action often does. Inspired action arises from clarity, not desperation. It feels calm even when it is bold. It feels grounded even when it is transformative. There is a profound intelligence in letting go of the need to be right, letting go of the need to blame, letting go of the belief that your life must make sense to others. When you release these attachments, you create room for wisdom to move through you. And wisdom always knows how to navigate complexity without creating more of it. You were never meant to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. That burden belongs to the ego, which believes it is solely responsible for everything. The soul knows that responsibility is shared with a greater intelligence. When you remember this, you stop exhausting yourself trying to control every variable. You do your part with presence and integrity, and you trust the rest to unfold. This trust is not naive. It is deeply practical. It allows you to conserve energy, to respond rather than react, to see possibilities where fear once saw dead ends. It allows you to forgive yourself for not knowing then what you know now. Self-forgiveness is one of the most liberating acts you can practice. It dissolves shame, and shame is one of the ego's favorite tools for keeping you small. As shame dissolves, so does the belief that you must earn love or approval. You begin to act not to prove your worth, but to express it. This shift changes everything. Work becomes service. Relationships become opportunities for growth rather than validation. Challenges become invitations rather than threats. The impossible situation becomes a doorway rather than a wall. And you start to notice something else. Gratitude arising naturally, even in the midst of uncertainty. Not forced gratitude, not denial, but a quiet appreciation for the strength you didn't know you had, for the clarity that comes from hardship, for the awareness that grows when illusions fall away. Gratitude is not a reaction to life being perfect. It is a recognition that life is purposeful. When you live from this recognition, you stop asking life to guarantee safety before you trust it. You trust first, and safety follows in forms you could not have predicted. This is the paradox. The ego resists and the soul understands. The more you trust the flow of life, the more life supports you. Not always in the ways you expect, but always in the ways you need for your growth. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be to learn what you are here to learn. Time is not punishing you. It is serving you. When you release the comparison game, measuring your journey against someone else's, you reclaim your own rhythm. And your rhythm is guided by an intelligence that knows the perfect timing for your unfolding. So continue forward with gentleness, with awareness, with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are supported even when you cannot see how. Let your actions be informed by presence rather than panic. Let your choices reflect who you are becoming, not who you were taught to be. And trust deeply and sincerely that God's way out is already in motion. It may not arrive with drama or spectacle. It may come as a subtle shift in perception, a conversation that changes everything, an inner decision that alters your trajectory. But when it arrives, you will recognize it, not because it solves everything instantly, but because it feels right. It feels aligned. It feels like coming home to yourself. And in that homecoming, you realize that the impossible situation was never meant to defeat you. It was meant to awaken you. And once that awakening begins, it does not announce itself with noise. It arrives quietly, like dawn, seeping into a darkened room, revealing what was always there but previously unseen. You notice that the world has not suddenly changed, yet you have. The same circumstances may still surround you, but they no longer define you. Their power diminishes the moment you stop handing it over to them through fear and identification. You begin to understand that the sense of being trapped was never caused by the situation itself, but by the belief that your life could be reduced to it. The ego loves reduction. It shrinks the vastness of your being into a single problem, a single role, a single moment in time. The soul expands. It remembers that you are more than any chapter you are currently living. You are the author, the awareness, the witness, and the unfolding story all at once. There is a sacred dignity in realizing that you do not need to rush your healing. Nothing in nature heals in a hurry. Bones mend in their own time. Seasons turn without anxiety. The heart, too, knows its rhythm. When you stop pressuring yourself to be over it or figure it out, you allow healing to move organically. And organic healing is lasting healing. It does not collapse under pressure because it was never forced into place. This is where compassion for yourself becomes essential. Not as a reward for progress, but as a foundation for it. The voice that criticizes you for struggling is not the voice of truth. It is the echo of old conditioning. The divine does not speak in condemnation. It speaks in reassurance, in guidance, in gentle redirection. When you learn to speak to yourself the way wisdom speaks to you, your inner world becomes a place of refuge rather than judgment. And from that refuge, clarity emerges. You begin to see which paths drain you and which nourish you. You recognize when you are acting from fear and when you are acting from alignment. This discernment is not harsh or rigid. It is calm and honest. It does not demand perfection. It invites authenticity. You no longer ask, how do I make this work at any cost? You ask, does this reflect who I truly am? As this question guides you, life responds. Opportunities that once felt forced fall away. Doors you kept trying to pry open close without drama, and other doors, ones you may not have even noticed before, begin to open effortlessly. This is not coincidence. This is alignment. When your inner direction shifts, your outer direction follows. The impossible situation, viewed from this expanded awareness, reveals its deeper purpose. It was not an interruption to your life, it was a recalibration of it. It slowed you down so you could listen. It challenged you so you could remember your strength. It dismantled illusions so you could live from truth. What once felt like punishment now feels like preparation. You start to trust that life is not testing you to see if you will fail. It is inviting you to see if you will awaken. Awakening does not mean the absence of difficulty. It means the absence of unconsciousness. It means meeting whatever arises with presence rather than panic, with curiosity rather than resistance, with faith rather than fear. Faith, in this sense, is not about believing that everything will go your way. It is about knowing that whatever happens can be used for growth, clarity, and expansion. It is the deep assurance that nothing is happening without meaning, even when the meaning is not immediately clear. This faith steadies you. It anchors you. It allows you to move through uncertainty without losing yourself. You may notice that the need to explain your journey to others begins to fade. When you are aligned, you no longer seek validation for your choices. You trust your inner knowing. Silence becomes more comfortable. Solitude becomes nourishing rather than lonely. You realize that connection to the divine within you is never absent. It is only overlooked when the mind is too loud. And as the mind quiets, gratitude deepens, not for specific outcomes, but for the awareness that you are guided. Gratitude for the resilience you have cultivated. Gratitude for the wisdom gained through experience rather than theory. Gratitude for the reminder that you are not alone, even when you walk a path others may not understand. This gratitude changes how you move through the world. You become less reactive, more responsive, less defensive, more open. You listen more deeply, not just to others, but to life itself. And life, when listened to, always tells you where to go next. The way out that God provides is rarely a dramatic escape. More often, it is a gentle awakening to the truth that you were never imprisoned in the first place. The bars were made of beliefs, fears, and identifications that no longer serve you. Once you see this, freedom is not something you chase, it is something you allow. So you continue, not with blind optimism, but with grounded trust. You take the next step, then the next, guided by a calm certainty that you are supported. You do not demand that the path be easy, you trust that it will be meaningful. You do not insist on control, you remain open to guidance. And in this openness, life meets you with solutions that feel natural, appropriate, and timely. In the end, what changes is not just your situation, but your relationship to life itself. You no longer see challenges as enemies to defeat, but as teachers to understand. You no longer measure success by the absence of struggle, but by the presence of awareness. And you no longer doubt that there is a way forward, because you have discovered that the way forward begins within you. This is the quiet miracle. Not that everything suddenly becomes perfect, but that you remember who you are while it unfolds. And from that remembrance, every step carries purpose, every moment carries meaning, and every so-called impossibility becomes an invitation to trust more deeply than ever before.